We're now live on Facebook.
Okay.
All right, welcome everyone to the first of our Georgians Abroad Meet the Candidates event. We are really excited that you're all here with us tonight. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of our guests, to our Democrats Abroad members, and to all of you who have joined this call from around the world. I'm Jennifer von Estorff, the Democrats Abroad Global State Teams Coordinator. And for those of you who aren't familiar with us, Democrats Abroad is the largest organization of US citizens outside the United States. And we're also an official arm of the Democratic Party. It's our mission to provide Americans abroad a voice in our government and elect Democratic candidates by mobilizing the overseas vote. In 2020, in no small part thanks to the overseas voters showing up like never before, the votes from abroad were the margin of victory in many of the tightest races, including for Biden in both Arizona and Georgia. We're grateful for everyone who voted in 2020, in spite of numerous obstacles, including the financial burden of mailing back ballots. We must show up again in 2020 and find even more overseas voters than ever before. The very fabric of our democracy depends on it. If you haven't done so already, please go to www.votefromabroad.org, and request your ballot and encourage all of your overseas friends and family to do the same. At present, there are approximately 30,000 Georgia voters registered from overseas. We need to not only make sure that those voters show up, but that we grow this base. Who else do you know? Who can help vote? Who can you help to vote from abroad? Who can you share today's recording with to ensure that they vote this year? As we approach this critical midterm at Democrats Abroad, we're really looking to bring the elections and the issues closer to you so that you know who and what is on the ballot, and so that lawmakers stateside know more about issues unique to overseas voters. As we approach this critical midterm, we want to ensure that our state teams are filling this role and helping to connect voters to what's going on back home. In this vein, I'd like to thank our Georgians Abroad state team for organizing today's Meet the Candidate event and preparing voting guides to help you navigate the complex process of voting from abroad. We also thank all of our caucuses for participating, and of course you, our attendees, for taking time to make an informed decision ahead of the May 24th Democratic primary and runoff. Today's discussion will feature 5 Democrats running in the primary for the offices of Lieutenant Governor, Secretary of State, and Attorney General. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Please note that Democrats Abroad has not endorsed any candidate and is committed to remaining neutral for the duration of the primary. All candidates who have filed and will be on the ballot were invited to attend today's event. We look forward to doing all that we can from abroad to see the candidates get the support of our DA Georgia members. After the primary, we will do as much as we can to support the Georgia Dems as they fight to win statewide races, keep the US Senate seat, and send more Democrats to the House. Remember to participate in the 2022 elections. You can request your ballot at votefromabroad.org. And with that, I'll pass it off to Evelyn Riera, Georgians Abroad team lead, who will share some information about the work the team is doing on behalf of Georgians Abroad. Take it away, Evelyn.
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer. Welcome, everybody. I'm really excited to welcome our candidates, our caucuses, and the audience. My name is Evelyn Riera, and I am the team lead for the Georgia State team. The team was founded last year alongside other state teams. Since elections are organized by state, it makes sense to have groups that focus on states. The overseas voting bloc represents an enormous potential. According to the Election Assistance Commission's 2020 report, only about 7% of overseas voters vote. That means that 93% do not vote. And even so, in 2020, we saw what those votes could mean in states like Georgia and Arizona. In Georgia, 18,000 ballots were cast, exceeding Biden's margin of victory of about 12,000 votes. That means that without the overseas votes cast by Georgia overseas voters, Biden would not have won Georgia. So every vote really counts. And as Jennifer said, it would be really wonderful to expand this base, and we have to find out how to do that. Democrats Abroad and the state teams want to reach out and increase the number of voters who participate. Democracy is a team sport, and we need more active players. We are organizing events like this one, where we invite candidates and other persons of interest to inform voters. We want to reach out to colleges and universities to reach young people who are abroad. And we want to reach out to the military and civilian voters who are on bases here abroad. As we all know, new voting bills were introduced in 2021, introducing a number of changes for voters across the board. There will also be changes for overseas voters, and we have prepared a voting guide to help navigate these changes. We sent that out with a letter to all the Georgia voters. And I just wanted to use this space, because it's a new process, that there are several changes. One change is that there's a new website. So the website will look different, which for some people will be a challenge. And this time around, there will be 2 ballots. For the primary, there's a regular ballot and a runoff ballot. And these come together because the window between the regular primary election and the possible runoff has been shortened. So to avoid the problem of sending back your runoff ballot and it arriving too late, you get the runoff ballot with the regular ballot. And you have to fill out both ballots, obviously, and 2 oaths of elector and send them in. The local election offices have already started sending out ballots as of last week. I and others have already received their ballots. You can still, if you haven't registered and you haven't requested your ballots, you still can do that until April 25th, 2022. After the event is over, we had a question already from Alicia. I'd like to stay here and answer any questions you may have about voting, about accessing the new website, about the ballots, or whatever questions you may have. Okay, thank you for your time. I'll hand over to Dee Dee, who will introduce Representative Allen. Dee Dee? You have to unmute. Unmute. Oh.
Dee Dee, we're having trouble hearing you. Okay. Dee Dee's got several computers going.
You hear me now?
Yes, wonderful.
Okay. Sorry. Today we'll be hearing from 2 candidates for Lieutenant Governor, Representative Eric Allen and Dr. Jason Hayes. The Lieutenant Governor of Georgia is the 2nd ranking officer of the executive branch and the first in line to succeed the governor if the office holder is unable to provide the required duties. In addition to serving as president of the state senate, the lieutenant governor votes in case of a tie, presides over debate in the Senate chamber, and works with the advocates to introduce legislation. Representative Eric Allen is a member of the Georgia House of Representatives, serving the 40th district. In 2018, Cobb County voters sent him to the state capitol to advocate on behalf of small businesses, working families, and healthcare access. Representative Allen has also been an advocate for environmental justice and a check on Republican attempts to make voting more difficult for people of color. Representative Allen formed the bipartisan legislative working group on addiction recovery. It's only the 2nd caucus in the country, to reduce the stigma of mental health and substance abuse. He then went on to represent Cobb County as the chair of the Cobb legislative delegation. In his time running for office and since representing the 40th district, he has advocated for families and small businesses with both his voting record and his commitment to community involvement. Eric Allen works as a management consultant and lives in the Vinings area with his wife, Timika Allen, and his daughter, Elise. We look forward to hearing your vision for Georgia, Representative Allen. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dee, and thank you for having me. I guess I'll start off, because this is the Abroad group, by saying good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. It's always good to talk to this group, because it takes a special person to not only stay engaged when they live stateside, but to continue to stay engaged when you're abroad is what democracy is all about. So I appreciate the effort that you all have, not only to continue to participate, even though you're not stateside, but also to learn about the candidates, because you're not here getting the media and the news and the other things that highlight some of the candidates. So that's my start is thank you so much for what you're doing. The bio is really thorough, so I don't have to introduce myself too much, but just to repeat, I am Eric Allen. I represent Georgia's 40th district, and for a point of reference, for any of you that live in Cobb or Fulton, or vote in Cobb or Fulton, it is the district that's North Atlanta, North Buckhead, all of Vinings, and a little bit of Smyrna and Mabel. So it's a very diverse district, very unique district. One of the things Dee Dee said is that I was elected to the House in 2018, but there's a little bit more to the story. It's actually a very good story of persistence and resilience. I first ran for this seat in 2014. I was working as the executive director of development for the Georgia Department of Behavioral Health, and saw that we had so many deficiencies in our state government that it prompted me to leave my job and to run for office, because you can't run for office as a state employee. So I left my job, ran for office in 2014 in a district that was gerrymandered 60-40. It was a 60% Republican district. Everyone told me I was crazy, but I went to my supporters and said, look, if you stick with me, I promise you I will flip this seat. So I ran in 2014, got 41% of the vote. Ran in 2016, got 47% of the vote. Ran in 2018, finally flipped the seat from a 20-year incumbent Republican, and then won re-election in 2020 with almost 60% of the vote. So in an 8-year window, because of the work that was done, and I don't like to attribute it to demographic changes. I think that's a cop-out. There are a lot of people doing a lot of work in Georgia to get voters out, to educate voters. And tapping into that, we were able to take a district that was drawn to be 60% for a Republican in 2010, to after the 2020 census, this seat being drawn 64% Democratic performance. So they've basically given up on this seat because of the work that we've done. So that really informs why I felt like it was time to move on to lieutenant governor. One of the things that I bring to the table is that wealth of experience, not only as a legislator, but by being the only legislator in either the House or the Senate that has ever served as an executive in state government. And we talk about the 40 days of the legislative session where the lieutenant governor presides over the Senate, but there are also 365 other days where we can do, as I call, unlock Georgia. There's so many things we as Democrats can do administratively. If we have a Governor Abrams and a lieutenant governor that can go into these departments and appoint commissioners, the role of lieutenant governor has over 150 appointments to various boards and authorities and committees that they make. If we put the right people in the right place to do the right jobs, it's not just about getting legislation passed through a Republican Senate and a Republican House, because we know that's the makeup that we're going to have. But it's what can we do from an administrative standpoint to really unlock Georgia for every single Georgian, and to fight for them and advocate them without having to go and sell our soul or over negotiate to get legislation passed. So that's why I'm running for lieutenant governor. That and also because of all the values. I have a proven track record. I'm not running on rhetoric. I'm running on a record, and Dee Dee ran off, a lot of it. The things that I'll add that weren't said is I'm the only candidate in this race out of 9 candidates that has run in a competitive election in November and won. We're not going to win this seat in May. We're gonna set the groundwork for putting together a ballot in May that can win in November. I'm the only one who has flipped a seat, who is running a tough general election and had everything thrown at me from the state, the local, and the national GOP. I think I'm probably one of the most vetted candidates outside of Stacey Abrams and Jen Jordan on the entire slate of Democrats that are running in this primary. I also have a perfect rating from the Georgia NAACP. I have a perfect rating from the Georgia Conservation Voters, and I was the 2021 Legislator of the Year by the Georgia Mental Health Consumer Network. And most of that was because of this license plate that's right behind me, where we passed legislation to not only help fund the Georgia Council on Substance Abuse and the Georgia Mental Health Consumer Network, but to break the stigma of recovery. We're all recovering from something. We all have or know or love someone who has issues with mental health or with addiction. And we have to do more in those areas to provide better services for every Georgian. So I'll get back to my stump speech. This has all been kind of like off the top of my head. And I only have a few minutes, but I just want to reiterate all the values that we have as Democrats. I understand firsthand how a great public school education can set the tone for lifelong success. How an accessible and quality healthcare system and infrastructure can not only save lives, but change lives. How a responsive and inclusive government can positively impact communities in ways that we very rarely see. And so those are the values that I bring to the table as I run for Lieutenant Governor. Lieutenant Governor is not a role that's a one of many. It's a one of one. And the reason I say that is because experience matters. There are 9 people in this race, but only a few that have legislative experience. And I know that, in some instances like State House, I had no experience, but also came in as one of 180. I had a leader, a whip, a chairman, suite mates, people that can help me through that process. The experience that I bring will have me prepared on day one to not only preside over the Senate, but to understand the dynamics of the 3-dimensional chess between the House of Representatives and the Speaker of the House, between the governor's office, all the different components that come together. It's not just about the legislation that's drafted, it's about where that legislation gets attached further in the process. And being able to not only stop it once, but stop it twice. So many bad bills that we passed are on the last final hours of our legislative session. Those are not because of bills that were introduced 3 months ahead of time. It's because of language that's percolating and circulating around throughout the entire session. So I'm asking you guys to believe in Georgia with me. Believe in a just society, a just system of education where your zip code doesn't determine your outcome. A just healthcare system that understands healthcare is about dignity and respect, and it's a human right to have quality access to healthcare. To believe with me that we are much more in Georgia than what people read, our assaults on democracy. We can protect the vote, one person in a safe and secure way. There's so many problems that we have to tackle in Georgia, and they're not unique to Georgia, by the way, but our solutions be. We must have a unique approach to the solutions that we face. I'm asking you to believe with me, and when you get your UCAVA ballot or however you're voting, that you vote Eric Allen for Lieutenant Governor. And I promise I'll continue to be with you and fight with you for the Georgia that we know we want. Thank you. And I'm going to, as we do the Q&A, I'm going to change my name to my web address instead of putting it in the chat, because this makes it, I think, a little bit easier for people to see. So my name is not www.allenforgeorgia.com, but I want to make sure you see that as we move forward.
Okay. Okay, Didi, thank you. Didi?
You're on mute again, Didi. I think it's the dreaded double mute.
Evelyn, why don't you go ahead?
Okay, then thank you very much, Representative Allen, for your good energy and explanations. Now we hand off to the caucuses. It says, thank you for sharing your priorities for the state with us. We'd now like to turn over to our Democrats Abroad Global Caucuses to ask a few questions. We'll first hear from the Global Disability Caucus. That's Alyssa Schoenemann. Alyssa, you're...
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Yes.
My name is Lucy Schoenemann. I wrote out of New York, but I'm living in the northwest part of Germany right now. Today I am the Global Disability Caucus representative, and in our caucus, I'm also the education coordinator. Thank you for allowing me to speak today, Representative Allen. And my question is, what healthcare legislation would you hope to see put before the Senate to address the issues of accessibility for people with disabilities?
Yeah, so that's a great question. It's very very broad. So I'm going to answer in a couple of different ways, but if at any point I'm not addressing it, just kind of raise your hand and wave me off, which means shut up and get back on topic. But you know, when you talk about accessibility, there's so many ways that we can address accessibility. I think Georgia has not focused on it the way it should, and that's really relevant. And most people don't know, but in 2009, it was 8 or 9, the state of Georgia was sued for violations of ADA, Americans with Disability Act, and for CRIPA, Civil Rights for Institutionalized Persons Act. We are still under federal oversight of our mental health and disability services because of how poorly we address those services. There are different things that I think we can do to address accessibility. We can address accessibility in our schools for the disabled community. I think that 508 should not, you know, Section 508 of ADA of having accessibility for certain disabilities should not just be a vision, but should be a given in so many areas. We kind of only pick and choose of who's enforcing that, a requirement. I think the state of Georgia should look at that federal requirement and enforce it for all businesses and education institutions. So that's one way we can address accessibility. I think we can do a little bit better with addressing accessibility when it comes to access of services. You know, you walk into most state offices and you would have to ask for Braille. Is that a time limit?
Yes, yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. So anyway, there are a lot of ways through the legislative process, but once again, Lieutenant Governor, there are certain things we can do through expectation and administrative rule to make sure our agencies are doing what they need to do to serve our disabled population correctly.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry, how much time do I have on each question, just so I know? I don't want
We're actually over the time.
oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah. So I actually should be introducing the next speaker. Is that okay?
Sorry.
Yes. No, it's okay. I mean,
You can take, I think. Yep.
yeah.
I think I
So
got started a few minutes late though, past the 1:10 mark, but that's okay.
yeah, should we take one more question, Jennifer? Or
Let's go ahead and finish the caucus questions. Let's do it. Like if we can do
all
them. in
right.
one of each, that would
Okay.
I'll be prompt.
Okay. Our next group is the Environmental Climate Change Council, represented here by Angela Fobbs. Angela, you're on.
Hi, Representative Allen.
Hello.
Georgia has recently been hit by a tornado, and hurricanes are constantly a concern for Georgia. What will you do to ensure Georgia will be able to respond appropriately to extreme weather events? And what will you do to make the state more resilient against further climate catastrophes?
So thank you very much for that question, Angela. And for the sake of brevity, the tornado situation is more, to me, if you're referring to what happened in Noonan, I'm assuming with the disaster relief and all that, to me, that can't happen again. When the state advocates for federal relief, we can't just take no for an answer. So to me, that's not a preventative, but more area of how do we, if you think about the response we had to Hurricane Michael, it was much more robust. And I think that was because of more of the agriculture community was impacted. Regardless of who's impacted, we need to have the same response. So I'll stop with that. What I would say to the infrastructure question, which I consider infrastructure, is making sure our coastal area is prepared for the next hurricane. We've been very lucky in Georgia, have a lot of near misses. But I, as Lieutenant Governor, will advocate that we not just worry about deepening the Port of Savannah, but also the barrier islands and some of the other infrastructure things that we can do to make sure we're ready to prevent disaster when it comes.
Great, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Because of the time, I'd say that was the last question, and I will go to the next speaker. Thank you very much, Representative Allen. Thank you for coming today.
Thank you all for having me.
Our next speaker is Dr. Jason Hayes. He's here, right? I can't see this.
Yes,
Yeah,
I am here.
all right,
How are you?
okay. Well, I'm pleased to see you today.
Pleased to meet you. Absolutely.
Dr. Jason Hayes is a candidate for Lieutenant Governor. He was inspired to run for office even before graduating high school. So he started early, winning a race for peer elected state representative during his time at the American Legion Boys State Program. At the historic Xavier University of Louisiana in New Orleans, Jason continued his commitment to public service through community service programs. During medical school at Meharry Medical College in Nashville, he participated in an internship with the Honorable Jim Cooper of Tennessee's 5th Congressional District, which taught him that you can impact people beyond the hospital walls with public service, a lesson which has impacted his entire medical career. Following his residency as an internal medicine resident at Baylor College of Medicine in Houston, Jason served as a public health doctor with the National Health Service Corps, where he provided quality health care to underserved communities in Tennessee. During his service commitment, Dr. Hayes was active with the American College of Physicians. For his efforts as a young emerging leader, Dr. Hayes was elected as a fellow of the American College of Physicians. Dr. Hayes relocated to Georgia in 2015 to practice internal medicine. He earned his physician executive MBA in 2016 and opened his own practice in the city of Alpharetta, Georgia. Dr. Hayes then ran and won his primary race for Democratic nominee for state representative in North Fulton's House District 49. In the general election, Dr. Hayes ran a strong race against a longtime Republican incumbent. Given the tremendous support from Georgia voters, he developed a stronger commitment to public service. We look forward to hearing your vision for the state and hand the mic over to you, Dr. Hayes.
Thank you so much. And I appreciate all of you Democrats abroad for allowing me to come and speak with you. I'm really excited about this, and I appreciate the introduction about myself. And one thing I want to talk about is experience. Many of the other candidates talk about their experience. And one thing I like to talk about is that we have two great United States senators representing Georgia. That is Senator Warnock and Senator Ossoff. And what's common about the both of them is that they never held office prior to running for United States Senator, which is arguably one of the more powerful positions in the United States federal government. You're really like one way away from running for president. So what I like to say is experience is relative and it's also subjective. From an objective perspective with this particular job as Lieutenant Governor, everyone, all the candidates, but if they win, will have to learn the position of Lieutenant Governor and Governor as well, because unfortunately, no one has been a Lieutenant Governor or Governor. We have no incumbents. So everyone will be in the process of learning. So what I like for people to look at is transferable skill set. Politicians, career politicians, retired career politicians are ones that get indoctrinated by a system. But the question I ask all of you is that, do you have better health care in the state of Georgia and United States? Are your taxes lower? Do you have more money in your pockets? Are disadvantaged or marginalized people in a better position than what they are? If they are, vote for these candidates that have been indoctrinated in the system. If not, many of you as voters have every right to research candidates, new candidates, and look at the skill set that they bring. Public service is something that was taught to me since I was young. My grandfather is a World War II Korean War veteran. He also was a master drill sergeant in Fort Polk, Louisiana. And when he finished, he ended up becoming a school teacher, high school teacher in history and also English. My father also was in the Navy, he was a veteran as well. Also his mother, my paternal grandfather's wife, also was a 40-year education teacher in the education system. And my mother is also a nurse, and she's retired now. So public service is something that was taught to me as a young age. And I mentioned it before, being exposed as a young person with the American Legion, that is with Boys State. So public service isn't something I decided to do 10 years ago, or just decided something that was born into me or given to me as a young age. And I realized as a young person, as a gifted young person, that my ability is high, but I have to give back in order to make this world better. So moving forward, again, background, medical doctor, also a master's in public health, where I've studied both Medicaid and Medicare programs, also worked as a congressional intern, went to Baylor College of Medicine as well in Houston, board certified. I worked with the National Health Service Corps and also in federally qualified health centers, and also was an interim medical director as well. So I got a lot of experience understanding and learning about Public Health Service Grant Section 330 to bring federally qualified health centers to underserved communities. I've also worked with the state of Tennessee when I was there in health policy. And I mentioned before, I went back and got a executive MBA, physician executive MBA as well, but I've learned about budgeting, finance, economics, health economics, crisis management, organizational change, leadership, things that are critically important to any leadership position, in particular one for lieutenant governor. What I tell people is this: I don't owe any Democrats, I don't owe any Republicans. And another thing I would say is that I'm not in debt to a party, but I'm here for people. And when we say it like that, those values resonate even more because it shows where dedication is. I take care of patients every day. I make decisions on people's lives every day. And being in a position to make decisions is something that I don't take lightly. It's an ethical and also a legal responsibility that I have. But it's also the way how I care for my patients, the way I'm going to care for all Georgians. Because what I tell people is that when we do a good job in Georgia, we're going to do a great job and show what other states in the United States can do as well. So moving forward, the reason why I'm running for lieutenant governor is based upon, one, my showing that I had in a Republican-led district in North Fulton. As a first-time candidate, got 47.2% of the vote, showed that not only I was a great candidate for Democrats, but a candidate Republicans respect. So the question I get is, why not run again? You may flip that seat, Doc. What I tell people is that Alpharetta is going to do well. That area is full of CEOs, millionaires, doctors, lawyers. So the concern is all of Georgia. So the 4 platform issues that I have for the state of Georgia that need to be addressed. Number 1 is healthcare. We're ranked 43rd in healthcare. Also, we are the second highest or the second worst in maternal mortality, in particular, the south of Georgia. And also there's a healthcare disparity in which Black women are 3 times more than likely than white women to die during childbirth. At Meharry Medical College, I learned about healthcare disparities. And also this was even accentuated with the National Health Service Corps. So not only would I be pushing for Medicaid expansion, will help get 400 to 500,000 Georgians with access to health insurance, but we'll get federal funds to help keep critical access hospitals open. But that's not enough. We're going to need healthcare systems, and we're also going to need doctors available to see the influx of new patients. Without doctors and healthcare systems, all we're doing is giving people catastrophe insurance, and that's not enough. I will leverage my experience and skill set with the federal government and with the National Health Service Corps to get Public Health Service Grant Section 330, that is to get federally qualified health centers in underserved communities, in particular the south of Georgia, Augusta, Atlanta, Columbus. Those are pockets where there are underserved communities. And also we need to increase the reimbursement rate for physicians so we can get more doctors in communities of need, and also leverage relationships with healthcare systems so they'll be able to take on the influx of new patients.
Okay.
2, education. Without education, I would not.
We have to leave time for questions from
Okay.
the caucuses
Very
and the
good.
audience. So thank you very, very much. I share your concern for those statistics. Very interesting.
Very good.
Is Sally there, or is she not there for the Global Women's Caucus?
I don't know. She isn't.
Okay, Angela, could you take over for the Global Women's Caucus?
Sure, happy to do it. Dr. Hayes, very nice to meet you.
Hey, how are you doing?
Great. I am doing great. I have a question for our Global Women's Caucus. What will you do to ensure that all women, including poor and minority women, can control their bodies by having full access to affordable birth control and abortions in Georgia, including the right to choose when they want to start or enlarge a family?
Absolutely. So the first thing we must do, we have to get this heartbeat bill repealed. And also there's another bill that essentially was passed about where you cannot mail abortion pills or contraceptives to women. So I'll be aggressive about getting all of these changed. Number two, again, I mentioned before about making sure that we get federally qualified health centers in underserved communities. What I really believe is that women and all young people in particular need to have primary care doctors and access to obstetrics and gynecology so they can create a relationship with these particular doctors. So when it's time to have family planning discussions, access will be there and available. But we also must make sure that we continue to support the EACH Act as well, so that women can have access to abortions on the local, state, and federal level as well. So love to leverage my relationships on the state level and the federal level and be an excellent conduit to make sure that women have access to not only abortions but to proper reproductive care.
Okay,
Very much.
thank you very much. Elisa from the Global Disability Caucus, Elisa Schoenemann.
Yes, hello. My question is, what healthcare legislation would you hope to see put forth to the Senate to address the issues of disability for people with disabilities?
Absolutely. So American Disability Act, ADA, must be followed. Again, I mentioned before by getting more federally qualified health centers in underserved communities. When we're dealing with ADA, we must make it a priority that all facilities, in particular healthcare facilities, focus on this. We also must make sure that we have doctors available to see people who have all disabilities. As you're aware, Medicare is one of the insurances and also Medicaid that's available for individuals who have Medicaid and Medicare. So we must push to make sure that there's access for people, especially those who we say are disabled as well. So my whole goal is to think as a physician and to make sure that everyone has access, and also make sure that any devices that are available, because I know devices, wheelchairs, any other assist device are difficult to get access to. So we must make sure that the provisions are available for individuals who are disabled to have access to any such devices.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jennifer, do we have time for one more question, or
Go for it. Yeah.
Was that a yes?
Yes.
All right, okay, then back to Angela for the Environmental Climate Change Council. It's your turn.
Thank you once again. Georgia has recently was hit by a tornado, and hurricanes in the Atlantic are always a concern. What will you do to ensure Georgia will be able to respond appropriately to extreme weather events? And what will you do to make the state more resilient against future climate catastrophes?
Absolutely. So I grew up in Louisiana, if I didn't mention before, a state that's always been ravaged by hurricanes as I'm younger. So to answer the issue with hurricanes is that we have to make sure that our barrier reefs are protected and also our coastlines. So we must make sure that they aren't eroded. In addition, we must make sure there are policies and protocols in place to make sure that in the event that there is a catastrophe, whether it's a hurricane or tornado, that these policies or procedures are in place to, number one, make sure people are evacuated appropriately in the event that there is a natural disaster or attack, and then B, there's support for recovery as well. This isn't something that we shouldn't just sit back and think about. It's something that should already be pre-planned, set up, and also we must have mock trials of any kind of disaster issues and all that. So we need to have better training. So, it's something as a lieutenant governor, I tell people that lieutenant governor and governor are different offices. In a lot of ways, I think that's a good thing, because what I do for my position is review everything, and I'll make everybody accountable, including that situation with policy change, environmental policy change.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's our time. Thank you for coming to speak with us today, Dr. Hayes, and
I appreciate all of you.
best of luck with your campaign. It was great meeting you.
Yes, absolutely.
And I'll hand over to Beverly to introduce Dr. John Eves.
Okay, thank you, Evelyn. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So this evening, we will also be hearing from two candidates for the office of Secretary of State, Dr. John Eves and Senator Floyd Griffin. The Georgia Secretary of State has more responsibilities than most other state officials aside from the governor. For example, duties including supervising and monitoring elections and providing campaign finance disclosure, managing and preserving public records, and providing educational programs about the Capitol, in addition to licensing, monitoring, and registering professionals and businesses. It's a lot. So one of the candidates, Dr. John Eves, welcome. He came to Georgia to attend Morehouse College, and while there, he received local and national recognition for his volunteering in the Atlantic Public School System. John gained his first experience in politics while volunteering for his uncle Reginald Eves' campaign for the mayor of Atlanta. And then following his graduation from Morehouse, John served as the national director of the NCAA Volunteer for Youth Program and was the Southeast Regional Director of the Peace Corps. In 2006, John achieved his dream of a public service by getting elected as chairman of Fulton County. That's Georgia's most populous county. John has a master's degree in religion from Yale University and a PhD in educational administration from the University of South Carolina. This seasonal politician is the recipient of numerous prestigious awards, including 2 Fulbright Awards in Germany and Finland, and an American Memorial Fellow. Following his time as chairman of Fulton County, John launched Atlanta Speaks on the Atlanta Interfaith Broadcasters Network. This addresses various community and political issues, such as criminal justice reform, integrity of US elections. The show has featured many notable guests, such as the current Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger. John also spends his time as the executive director of the Global Youth Ambassadors Program and is a senior instructor at Spelman College, which is in Atlanta. He's the father of 2 adult children, and he lives in Atlanta. And we look forward to hearing your plan for the office of Secretary of State. Thank you, Dr. Eves. The floor is yours.
Well, Democrats Abroad, thank you so much for this opportunity for all of us to explain our background and our platform. And Beverly, thank you for that introduction. Just to highlight a couple of things that Beverly already mentioned or may have not mentioned. I do have an international perspective. I'm the former regional director of Peace Corps, and my son served in Lesotho 2 years ago, and certainly understands some of the nuances and challenges that Americans abroad have. And so I appreciate the opportunity again to speak to you today. So I'm a father of 2 grown adult children who are in college, North Carolina A&T and Duke University. I am a small business owner. I have a program where I provide opportunities for young people to travel abroad every year. Over 600 high school students from Georgia has gone to many places around the world. Some of them, before going abroad, had never been out of the state of Georgia. Very proud about that. Along with being a business owner and a father, as Beverly pointed out, I teach dynamic young women at Spelman College in political science. Many of them, as a result of teaching, being in my classes, are inspired to go into politics or public policy making or to law. And more importantly, relevant to the Secretary of State's position, I'm the former chairman of Fulton County, a big job. Largest county in the state of Georgia. I served for 11 years, 3 terms. And I first got elected in 2006. Prior to then, only Republicans had been elected there for about 20 years prior to me being elected. I served with distinction, known as a person with fairness, integrity, led the fight to save Grady Hospital, did the most comprehensive criminal justice reform under my watch, oversaw the largest local voting operation in the entire state of Georgia, increased voter access, 350 precincts under my watch. We funded our elections department $6 to $9 million every year. We were the first government under my watch to do souls to the poll and do 3 weeks advance voting, which was a novel concept back in 2014 or so. People only voted on election day. Voter participation expanded by 7% under my watch. Very proud of my background. Not only did I do a lot in terms of voting, but brought jobs, brought companies through tax credits, tax incentives, UPS, et cetera, to Fulton County under my watch. So friends, I'm running Secretary of State because of several reasons. We need new leadership in the office. Voting in our state is being besieged by Republicans who want to disenfranchise Black and Brown communities. We need new leadership. Precincts are being threatened to be shortened, reduced in certain counties, and there has not been any voice of opposition by the Secretary of State's office. He has been silent. We need somebody to defend the vote and to increase access to voting. So that's the number one reason why I'm running for this office. But there are other reasons that I'm running for this office, and Beverly alluded to this. The Secretary of State's position is an executive position. It is wide-ranging. It's a corporations division that oversees 1.1 million small businesses in Georgia. Unfortunately, many small businesses fail in the first year because we need to provide support to the small business sector. And I want to do all that I can to support small businesses, helping them to access capital, the ABCs of running your business. And also 35% of our businesses are owned by women and Black folks. And we need to make sure that women and people of color have the opportunity to receive contracts from state and local government. Georgia is a very diverse state, 49% non-white, 32% Black. But when it comes to the procurement of contracts from state and local agencies in the low single digits, and that's unacceptable. And then there's the licenses division. And so there's a lot of opportunity to push the licensing boards to be more inclusive with their certification requirements than they are right now. And the fourth major area is the securities business, the securities industry. This is bank regulatory standards, private equity financing, banks, commercial real estate. And in that area, there is a need for more diversity, representation in all of these financial sectors. And for those of us who are seniors, who sometimes are susceptible to people who want to scam our retirement accounts, guess what? The Secretary of State's office can investigate. And if there's someone deemed to be a potential scammer, can refer it to the Attorney General's office for prosecution. So my friends, I want you to know that I am someone who has experience, the breadth and the depth of experience to do a great job as Secretary of State, principally because of my professional experiences, as well as my 11 years of political experience managing, overseeing the largest local government in Georgia, 1.1 million strong, a government that had 4,500 employees. I interfaced with 15 different mayors and convened mayoral council. So friends, I'm well qualified. I look forward to having questions, receiving questions from you, and I would certainly love to get your support. Yes, I'm very enthusiastic, Evelyn.
Beverly? Beverly?
Sorry about that. Okay, thank you, Dr. Eves. That was great. Thank you for all of the work that you've done for Georgia. That's very impressive, and the work that you plan to continue to do, and explaining the reasons for you running for this office and sharing your vision for the office of Secretary of State. So we do have several questions. We'll start with the first question will be coming from our Global Black Caucus. And Malika, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Eves. I love enthusiastic people. I'm accused of it myself. I'm standing in for the Global Chair, Lee Donato Moore, who couldn't be here today. And so I'd like to submit the question that was given to me. In terms of defending voting rights for people of color, who are more likely to face barriers to voting in Georgia, what will you do to ensure and uphold diversity, equality, inclusion, and accessibility?
Thank you for the question. So I'm a native Southerner. I was born in the South, and Georgia is one of the most diverse states in the entire country. I mentioned this already, 49% non-white. This is based on the US Census report in 2020, 32% Black. That is our strength. Unfortunately, conservative Republican Party doesn't see it that way. And so there truly are barriers being placed. There are local election boards in Camden County, in Lincoln County, and other counties in the state who are trying to restrict access to the voting by reducing the number of precincts. And so I'm going to do all that I can to defend everyone's right to vote, not just Black and brown people, but all people, no matter what your partisan association with. So I'm going to work closely with the local election boards and have a team-oriented experience. But the other thing I'm very interested in looking into is, just as the Supreme Court struck out the pre-clearance requirement when any local government wanted to change its election process, I'm very interested in instituting some sort of pre-clearance requirement within the Secretary of State's office. And what that means is, if any local jurisdiction wants to do changes to the way that it administers its elections, the precincts, et cetera, it should go through a review in the Secretary of State's office. And only objective reasons and criteria should be the grounds of any sort of changes, taking the politics out of it. And so I am determined to make sure that the diversity of our state is protected by me working very closely with the local election boards, but more importantly, establishing and instituting some sort of standards so that nothing can be changed unless it met the requirements of the Secretary of State's office.
Thank you so much. Keep your enthusiasm.
Thank you very much. Our next caucus is the Global Disability Caucus. Alyssa Schoenemann, it's your turn. You're on the floor.
Hi, perfect. Thank you for having me to speak today, Doctor. My question is, restrictive voting measures can have a disproportionate impact on people with disabilities. And Georgia has seen many attempts to limit access and disenfranchise various populations. Where do you anticipate the largest problems, and what do you see as the best remedies?
Yeah, so thank you for that question, Alyssa. So when I was chairman of Fulton County, we actually had a disability commission. We had members of the community who were disabled physically and other forms of disability. They actually were citizens who offered input to county government, Fulton County, on how we can best institute policy to make our communities more inclusive and respective of those with disabilities. So I have that background. Number two, because counties administer elections, they're supposed to be compliant with ADA, American Disabilities Act requirements. But so there are two things I'm very interested in doing. Number one is I would love to be able to have either a commission, advisory board, or even a focus group of members from the disability community to look at the full gamut of all the services that the Secretary of State's office provides. As I indicated, it's not just voting. Voting is important, but the full gamut and how can that office better serve the disability community. But a specific idea that I have is that right now people have to vote based on a pre-assigned precinct. And some of those precincts may be more accessible than others. Why not grant some sort of waiver for those who are within the disability community, where they will have the flexibility of voting in places that are the most ADA compliant. And so there are minimum standards, of course, but there's some places that go to an even higher standard. And so why not provide some sort of exemption and allow those with ADA, those with disabilities, to have the flexibility of going to whatever place that has the best accessibility to them, and that they should not necessarily be restricted to a specific precinct that may not be very ADA compliant.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We have one last question from the audience. a woman named Fiona. Question for you. She says, such an impressive story. Love your international experience. What are you able to do about gerrymandering?
Yeah, gerrymandering, it's a big problem in Georgia. And so as all of you know, gerrymandering is this partisan process of diluting the strength of the vote. There was a report that came out by a independent, nonpartisan organization that came either out of Johns Hopkins or Princeton, and they use, they're called fair maps. And based on their analysis, instead of carving out districts like District 6 and 7 in the congressional districts and losing a Democrat and or a Black person, that there actually should have been more parity within with the drawing of districts. In other words, it should be closer to more half Democrats and half Republicans in the state legislature. I'll do all that I can to push to make this as apolitical as possible, meaning there are independent, nonpartisan entities out there in the academic community and the corporate community that should be able to play a role in the drawing of maps. They don't necessarily have any sort of partisan tie-in. And at the end of the day, we want to make sure that the diversity of our state has commensurate representation on all levels of government. That's only the fair thing to do. So the long response to your question is, I think we need to have independent entities such as fair maps to be a part of the redistricting process to avoid gerrymandering that's happening in Georgia. And it is very egregious right now.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming, Dr. Eves, and good luck with your campaign. I'll hand over to Gladys to introduce Senator Griffin, who is our next speaker.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to introduce the next candidate for Secretary of State, the Honorable Floyd L. Griffin Jr., a Milledgeville native, has worn several significant hats throughout his lifetime, such as Mayor of the City of Milledgeville, Georgia State Senator, U.S. Army Colonel, and various others. Griffin is a Vietnam veteran and completed a tour of duty in Germany. He was also an assistant professor of military science at Wake Forest University and the ROTC director at Winston-Salem State University, where he was a coach for the college champion football team. In 1990, Griffin finished his esteemed military career and retired as a colonel. After moving home to Georgia, he became the state senator for the 25th district and served for 2 terms. This election was significant because he was the first African-American to represent a majority white district in the Georgia General Assembly. While a senator, Griffin served on numerous committees and as chairman of the Interstate Corporation Committee. After serving as a senator, Griffin ran for Lieutenant Governor of Georgia in 1998, making him the first African-American to run for that position in the 20th century. He was elected as the 67th mayor of the city of Milledgeville and held the position for the 2002 to 2006 term. Following his win, Griffin was awarded the James Wiverly Racial Barrier Breaker Award in 2002 for the accomplishment of being the first African-American mayor of Milledgeville. And what turned out to be one of Georgia's most contested and most important elections, Griffin was chosen in 2020 to be a superdelegate for the DNC to cast his ballot for his candidate, for the then candidate Joseph Biden. Griffin is married to Natalie Hoffman Griffin, also a Tuskegee graduate, and they have 2 children, Brian and Eric. The Griffins have 3 grandchildren. In February of 2021, to mark Black History Month, the city of Milledgeville officially renamed a street and the Black Heritage Plaza for the city's first Black mayor, Floyd L. Griffin. You can read more about Griffin in his autobiography entitled Legacies to Live, Winners Make It Happen are finest oral history and history makers collections at the Library of Congress. Well, that was very impressive. I'll turn it over to you, Senator Griffin.
Thank you very much for that introduction. And after that introduction, I think you all can just go on and vote for me, because you can see that my experience is deep and wide. Thank you all for inviting me today to be with you. I will not talk too much more about my background and experience, but what I want to start out stating, to make sure I get it on the record, is that I also have some abroad status. I spent 4 years in Germany commanding soldiers, and during that 4 years, I had to vote once, didn't have to, but I voted once for President of the United States. So, and the reason I'm bringing that up is because, as you all probably know, and especially a number of years ago, it's very difficult to vote and get your votes in on time and so forth. So one of the things that I'm going to do is take a very close look at the uniform and overseas absentee ballot process, not only for the civilians overseas, but especially for the military. And I would like to, my staff, we're going to take a look at a pilot program for online overseas voting for the military and others, that citizens that serve overseas. Now, as you well know, we have soldiers, well, we have military personnel, more than soldiers, over in Europe now, in support of what's going on in Ukraine. And a lot of those Georgians are going to have, I would think, a tough time trying to vote in the primary that's coming up. So we're going to take a close look at that. Also, in my military career, I attended the National War College in Washington, D.C. And one of the requirements for the National War College is we had to spend a 2-week sabbatical in some country outside of the United States. And it was a VIP state level 2-week visit. And I spent mine in Turkey and in Greece. So I have had some extensive military travels. And in my military days, I also traveled TDY throughout the Army's world with some very, very important positions that I had at the Pentagon. So one other thing that I'm going to do to address some of the questions that came up earlier, the way I'm going to organize the Secretary of State, I'm going to organize it with 2 deputies, interior deputy and an exterior deputy, and obviously a chief of staff and some other individuals. But the reason I'm bringing that up is my exterior deputy, I'm going to appoint a female in that position. And one of that person's responsibilities, which will be pretty great, because that individual is going to be my liaison and represent me with organizations and groups outside of the state government. And one of the things she'll do is be responsible for working with your organization to help me develop programs, to help me develop policies and how we're going to deal with some of the challenges of the overseas operation. I will also set up roundtables, corporate roundtables, business roundtables, small business roundtables. You see, I have more experience than anyone else running from the standpoint of the responsibilities of the Secretary of State. You just look at my my resume on my website, and you can compare mine with the other individuals that are running against me. A small business person. My family own a funeral home. The funeral home has been around for over 100 years, and my family owned it for over 50 years. When I retired from the Army, I came back and became the president of the corporation, and later on, after the demise of my parents, my sister and I became the owners of the funeral home, which means that I not only had to be a licensed business person, but I'm also a licensed embalmer and a licensed funeral director. Now, another thing that I'm going to do, I'm going to set up a satellite office in Macon, Georgia, for the Secretary of State. I will spend several days a month there for people who want to come in and visit with me instead of driving all the way to Atlanta, especially the people in South Georgia, Middle Georgia, and they can come to see me from anywhere in Georgia. Because when you drive up to Atlanta, you get there and you have to find a place to park, and it's very expensive. Another reason for setting that office up, the licensing division is located there. And there are some problems and some challenges in the licensing division that would give me an opportunity to have a firsthand look at what's going on in the licensing division and make whatever necessary corrections. So the Secretary of State is about executive leadership, executive management, and executive experience. I have very broad executive experience in the military, in my local business, and when I was in the Senate, I was part of the leadership. So that's who I am. That's what I'm going to do. And I hope we can get the support from your organization to support me. And by the way, the election is on the 24th of May, as you well know. That's a very important day because that's my birthday. So please give me a birthday present. Any questions?
Gladys? You have to unmute.
Okay. Thank you very much. And I wish you a happy birthday when it arrives.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank you for your lifetime of service to Georgia and for sharing your vision for this Office of Secretary of State. Okay, now I would like to turn it over to our Global Bloc Caucus, Monica.
Gladys, again, I'd like to thank you, Senator Griffin, for your service. I've lost 3 people in Vietnam, so I'm glad to see you made it back. And I hope it's—
Matter of fact, thank you. Matter of fact, I was a helicopter pilot in Vietnam also. So I'm glad I made it back because helicopter pilots—
I'm glad you made it back. Well, I hope to really inspire other military, because we've discovered there's some soldiers that have had that experience and they've never voted still in their life, to give so much and have so little to say in government. So that's the inspiration to have people vote. I'm presenting you the same question that I did earlier about upholding diversity, equality, inclusion, and accessibility for all voters, especially when it comes down to defending the voting rights of people of color, who are more likely to face barriers in voting in Georgia. So I would ask you, what are your plans for that?
Well, first of all, what I'm going to do within the first 100 days, out of the first 180 days, I'm going to have roundtables. I'm going to go around the state in major regions like, Fulton County and Bibb County and so forth, and have listening sessions. And we also make it verbal, where I can help determine what happened during the last election, which will be my election. And that's the first time we would have had some challenges under the present laws that are in place. And out of that, I hope to determine what are some of the things we need to do for as diversity? Now, I've already mentioned one piece that I'm going to put in place by appointing a female as one of my deputies and some of the responsibilities that person has had. Now, my whole professional career, I have had to deal with diversity, and I will continue to do that to make sure, starting in my office and then working throughout the remaining of the Secretary of State, to make sure that is taking place. Now, I will work with the county from the standpoint of elections. I will work with the county election boards and individuals to try to make sure that they are doing that. But I will not have the authority to force them to do anything. So I will do everything I can to make sure that the Secretary of State look like Georgia. Did that answer your question? I don't see her.
Yes, thank you so much,
Yeah.
Senator.
Okay, thank you, Senator. I'm giving over to the Global Disability Caucus. Alyssa Schoenemann has a question for you.
Hello, Senator. My question is similar to ones that I've already stated before in terms of restricting voting measures. So restrictive voting measures can disproportionately impact people with disabilities. And Georgia has seen those attempts at limiting that access and disenfranchising various populations. So where do you anticipate the largest problems being, and what do you see as the best remedies for it?
Well, that's a very, very good question. And I'm not sure that I have the remedy for it. But, and I'm very concerned about that, because during this upcoming election with the absentee ballot requirements and so forth, it's going to cause some significant problems. So one of the things, and there's not a lot I can do about that now, other than when I'm out on the campaign trail, I'm encouraging as many people as possible to go and vote, vote in person. Now, those individuals I have concerns with in nursing homes, assisted living, are those individuals that can't go to the polls and vote. So I'm encouraging them, and I'm encouraging the local organizations like the NAACP and the Democratic Party, local Democratic parties and the state parties to make arrangements for those individuals to be able to be able to vote. Now, that is one of the things that I would like to address after this election is over, and when I become Secretary of State. I would definitely encourage and work with the legislature to try to overturn at least that portion of the present law.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Griffin. We have one last question from the Environmental Climate Change Council, Angela Fobbs. Angela?
Hi, Senator.
Hello.
What will you do to make the Secretary of State's office and their services more sustainable or environmentally friendly? You have a lot of services in this office. What will you do to make them a little bit more environmentally friendly?
Well, first of all, I need to identify where they are not environmentally friendly, and that will take place during my onboarding and when I start visiting the different departments, the different divisions, and determine where the challenges are and what needs to be changed. And at that time, between me and my senior staff, we will put in programs to make that happen. So I'm not sure if one thing I've learned about is going into CEO executive type of operations. You don't go in and make promises and tell people you're going to do things that you're not really sure of what's going on in that organization until you've had an opportunity to onboard and go around and inspect and ask questions to be able to come up with solutions for that. So that's the best answer I can give you.
Yep, that was a great answer. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, okay, I think we'll close for now the speaking time. Jennifer, do you want to do the wrap up?
No, Mr. Weiss Smith is here with us. We can turn it over to Sherry now.
Oh, I see. I didn't realize that. Okay, I'm sorry. Sorry for confusing. Wait a minute. Then I'm on the wrong page.
I can just go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, Sherry. Go ahead. Right. Well, I didn't know.
That's okay.
Go ahead.
Hi, everybody. I'm calling from Toronto. Good afternoon. To round off today's event, we'll hear from Assistant District Attorney Christian Y. Smith, who is running for the Office of Attorney General. The Attorney General provides legal representation to agencies, officers, and employees of the state government. Further duties include representing the state in court cases, prosecuting public corruption cases where there are dealings with the state, conducting special investigations into questionable activity concerning any state agency or department, and initiating civil or criminal actions on behalf of the state when requested to do so by the governor. Christian Y. Smith is an attorney, not-profit founder, children's book author, husband, father, and 7 years has proudly served as prosecutor with heart. Christian has said that his earliest memories are his mother being arrested and taken away from him. Having seen family members' lives shattered by drugs, violence, and murder, his grandmother was strip searched and arrested, and Christian himself kicked out of school at 17. He didn't see a future for himself that didn't involve the system. Instead, Christian became the first in his family to graduate from college. He went on to earn a master's degree in hospital administration and a law degree before accepting the position as assistant prosecutor in Fulton County, Georgia. Christian sat down and talked with his family, first to assess if he could live up to his own ideals in a justice system that hadn't always lived up to its promises. He came to realize that Georgia may never have a criminal justice system worthy of its name without more prosecutors with his perspective. Being a prosecutor with heart means knowing when to bring the full weight of justice to the dangerous and the corrupt, and when to give someone a second chance. As assistant district attorney, Christian learned through personal experience that we can be tough on serious crime without compromising on doing what is right. Christian also works in the nonprofit sector as the founder of the National Social Justice Alliance. He helped create programs to unite prosecuting attorneys across the country to end police brutality and increase voter education. Georgia is at the crossroads when it comes to voting, and the entire nation is watching. After Black voters stepped up to the ballot box to help turn Georgia blue in the last Senate election, outrageous voter suppression laws were passed. The current attorney is defending these laws that suppress the rights of Georgia. We look forward to hearing from you, Christian, to see what changes you would make in the Attorney General's office. Christian, we hand it over to you.
Well, thank you for that introduction. I think this is the first meeting that I've been on where someone introduced me that way. So thank you.
Anytime.
And thank you for, this organization. I mean, this is amazing just to see the engagement and the education and participation from everyone across seas, being, right here in the trenches with us for these elections, making sure that we see the outcomes that we want to see. So thank you for what you all are doing across the globe. And what I'll add to that beautiful introduction, I'll tell you about 2 years ago, I ran for Fulton County District Attorney here in Atlanta because as Ms. Ritter read in my bio, the criminal justice system is personal to me, having grown up in it. And in that election, I was the youngest candidate by far, the least known candidate by far, and I had significantly less money than the other two folks in that race. And it's important to note that in 2020, right after I launched that campaign, COVID broke out. So we were only able to do 2 in-person events before COVID broke out. And as that spread and the uncertainty that came with it, and folks, being laid off from their jobs left and right, including my wife, she lost her job at that time. It didn't feel right to me to call folks, asking to contribute to a political campaign. So I didn't fundraise for about 3 months. And then George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and here in Atlanta, Rayshard Brooks all happened in during that campaign as well. So I decided to be very open and transparent about my background with voters and sharing the story that you all just heard. And even though I didn't win that election, we captured about 25% of the vote. That was a lot of first-time voters, a lot of young voters, and a lot of Black men who had been registered to vote, but were choosing to sit out of elections. It broke down to about 40,000 votes. And we think we were able to capture them because we were open and personal. And we think that people are in a space now with politics where we're tired of cookie cutter politicians. We're tired of politicians who give middle of the road great answers. I think people are looking for something that's bold and new and exciting. And I think I represent all of that because, my background says I shouldn't be here. I heard dead or in jail my whole life growing up. Nobody would have ever saw me being an attorney, including myself. And I'll end my introduction with one story. 2013, my first year as a prosecutor, I had a 17-year-old kid arrested for marijuana. And I remember asking him where he saw himself in 10 years. He said he wanted to play in the NFL. I said, well, if you get convicted of this drug charge, you won't get federal money to go to college first because you can't get financial aid with drug convictions. So I created a diversion program for him. Kid completed everything. I threw his case out. The following year, his mother emailed me and said, hey, thank you for giving my son a chance. It wasn't in vain. He's at a junior college in Oklahoma, doing great in the classroom, great on the football field. In 2015, she called and said, hey, he transferred to the University of Tennessee. He has a chance to start this year. Thank you for giving my son a chance. In 2016, she called again and said, man, you have to come to a game with us. You have to come and experience this with us because we're here because of you. So my kids and I went to a game that year. We went to 3 of his games his senior year. But more significantly, I went to his graduation in 2018 and saw him get a bachelor's degree in communications. My immediate supervisor at the time, however, told me that as prosecutors, we are not social services. We are not counselors. Our job is to get convictions and bring money in the door. And I said, are you kidding me? We just changed this kid's life. And think about his family and his neighborhood and the folks he'll come into contact with who he can potentially help change their lives for the better. Because in my mind, as someone who grew up in the system, our job is to help people not come back. We don't want repeat offenders. We don't want to keep seeing crime happen in our communities. We all want to be safe. And so breaking it down into dollars and cents, if we give people like that the resources and the opportunities to have better lives, if they're busy working or pursuing their dreams, they're not busy committing crimes against you and I. They're not busy breaking into our cars or our homes. And if crime rates go down where we live, our property values go up. So that's money that comes back into our pockets by creating a new kind of justice system that I think I'm the only person in this race for Georgia Attorney General who knows that, who can implement that kind of approach so that we can see things really shift in a positive way across our state when it comes to criminal justice. But the Attorney General's office is bigger than that, right? We need an Attorney General who wants to protect our voting rights. We need an Attorney General who wants to ensure that women have the right to control their bodies. We need an Attorney General who understands how important it is for everyone to have access to affordable health care. And me having a master's degree and having worked in hospital administration, I have a really, really close connection and understanding with how healthcare works. So at this point, I'll stop talking. I can talk all day, but I know time is limited. I appreciate really the opportunity to be connected with you all across the globe and you all to hear a little bit about me. And I'm willing and ready to answer any questions that you have for me. So thank you for this opportunity.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your goals and that beautiful story for the office. Thank you for the goals, the goals for the Office of Attorney General, Christian. Our Global Disability Caucus will start off a question on healthcare, actually. So Alyssa, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. A perfect segue into my question. So hello, Christian. Thank you for speaking with us today. So my question is, disability healthcare costs represent about a third of Georgia's healthcare budget, but there are severe staffing shortages for support workers. Obviously, due to COVID, low wages account for some of that issue as well. And many families reportedly wait years for the services. What do you see as the most pressing, productive, and achievable answers for answering the needs of people with disabilities?
I think the most pressing answer to that is we need to expand Medicaid. Georgia is one of 12 states that hasn't. I don't understand why we have not. It seems like not only the smart thing to do, but the right thing to do. And if we have, families, kids, if we have our citizens with the access to the healthcare that they need, that makes our state better. If people are healthy, if they're able to get the treatment and the medications that they need, that means they're able to go to work. That means they're able to provide more for their families. And so having a governor, I think, first of all, in office who will fight tooth and nail for that, and having an attorney general myself who will work with our state reps and our state senators to make sure we expand it, I think is what we absolutely need to happen yesterday.
Thank you.
No, thank you for that question.
Thank you very much. Our next question is from the Environmental Climate Change Council. Angela Fobbs, you have the floor.
Hi, Christian.
Hey.
Traditionally, criminal penalties have not been imposed on polluters because regulation of pollution has long been regarded as an issue to be settled in negotiations. Will you investigate and prosecute polluters in your state?
Yes, ma'am. And I want to add another reason why I think we haven't seen much with it is a lot of elected officials take campaign contributions from companies who do the polluting. So I've been very vocal about who I will not take campaign contributions from. Police unions are one. I believe there needs to be a distinct separation between, the head of law enforcement and police to be able to hold those actors accountable. And then also people will fall into that space. We can't be productive and we can't be as good as we can be in our state if we have people sick because we have companies, dumping things into our environment. And so I'm going to dramatically change how we pursue those actors, not just in terms of seeking monetary compensation, but also looking into ways that we can to criminalize actors who do that in a different way. So definitely answering your question, yes, I will hold those folks accountable and do my best to make sure we end those kind of practices that, again, is one of those things that's been happening for a long time that I'm not sure why some folks are okay with it. But usually it takes something happening in your own backyard before people say, oh, now this is an issue. But we should care if it happens in your backyard or our friends or family's backyard. This shouldn't happen to any of us. So thank you for that question.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your answer. The next question is from the Democrats Abroad Global Black Caucus. Malika, you have the floor.
Hi, thank you so much, Christian. I want to combine two questions, so I hope it's not too broad. Yeah.
Yes.
They really focus on injustices, one in voting and ensuring that we have fair voting across the board. The other's injustices with environmental injustices, that there are many people of color who are living in pesticide-infected places, lead pipes, They don't have the same access to rebuilding their homes, the funding, jobs after climate catastrophes. And then the other is supporting and protecting the rights for the Black, Indigenous, people of color, as well as the LGBT. And I'm never good with these letters, LGBTQ, whatever it is. I have to learn that policies. So that's kind of broad, but it's focused on these injustices, that people have equal access to funding, to rebuild their homes, to get back to work after catastrophe, voting rights, and the rights for the LGBTIQ community and the Black, Indigenous, people of color community. I kind of put this all together.
Yes, ma'am.
So I'm sorry about that, but I wanted to throw that out there.
Yes, ma'am.
How will you support and move these things to work?
So in terms of, I'll start with voting. I think we were all upset when SB 202 came about after the 2020 elections. And I want to shout out the Attorney General in New York, Letitia James. She filed an amicus brief on behalf of Georgia. She joined in with the DOJ and fighting to say what we were doing in Georgia was unconstitutional. And I wholeheartedly agree with that. You know, and now in 2022, you know, our country should be doing things to make sure that voting is fair and equal and accessible for everyone. We shouldn't be going backwards. It feels like a lot of things that the Republican Party are doing are going back to Jim Crow times, going back to slavery times.
Yes.
And as long as I am able, you know, with the combination of my personal background and my professional background, I feel like has been a perfect mix of, you know, someone like me stepping up to fight for people who often feel overlooked, people who often feel left behind by the system. Because quite frankly, in my experience, there hasn't been many candidates in the country who have my personal background and professional background who've stepped up to say, hey, I want to be a voice for the voiceless. So I'm going to do everything in my power to join AGs like Letitia James. And there are 21 others, I believe, across the country who came together with her to say, hey, what you guys are doing in Georgia is wrong. We should make sure that everyone has, you know, equal access to voting. In terms of the injustices, you mentioned about living conditions for folks, you know, pesticides and what I would just say, terrible living conditions. I spent the first couple of years of my career as a prosecutor, prosecuting slumlords for having folks in those type of conditions. You know, again, just because someone does not have, you know, many means or is low income does not mean they should be treated inhumanely. And we need someone leading the criminal justice space here in Georgia who understands that, to say, hey, everyone needs decent housing. Everyone needs safe housing. You wouldn't want your kids or your family members living in these conditions. So why is it okay to put, you know, low income folks in these conditions, or minority folks in these conditions, or immigrants? It's not acceptable in the United States of America, and it shouldn't be acceptable in the state of Georgia. And I want to definitely use my platform and voice as Attorney General to help address those issues. And then you brought up, you know, the LGBTQ issues as well. Like a lot of my platform for this race, this issue was also personal to me. I'm the oldest of 4 children. My mom had 3 boys and 1 girl. And that girl, my sister, she's a member of the LGBTQ community. So I've seen some of the discrimination that she's faced, you know, her entire life. I've seen how people have treated her because of who she loves and who she is as a person. And, you know, I want to use my voice not only to protect my little sister, but to protect everyone. You know, love is love. Yeah. I don't think people should be discriminated against based on who they choose to love or who they want to marry or who they want to build families with. And my kids, you know her affectionately as Aunt Woody. And my kids don't see anything wrong with, you know, how she's living her life, because they just see their, you know, as their aunt who they love and they love spending time with and they love getting gifts from. And so, and so you know how little kids are. But my point is, you know, I think that I want you guys to be confident and know that I'm bold, I'm different. I'm not scared to speak my mind. I'm not scared to stand up for what's right. I won't be bought. I've turned campaign money down. I'm not making backhanded deals with anybody. I don't care about political power, because you don't overcome the hell that I overcome growing up to then end up selling your soul. Nobody can step in my shoes. Nobody was willing to pay that price for me having to sleep on floors and sleep in my car and see my mom in jail, having to pay rent for the first time when I was 15 years old, and having to miss meals and having to see my uncle serving life in prison. Nobody can pay the price for that. I've already paid the price for that. So I'm not for sale. So what I am willing to do is be the big breath of fresh air that I think we need in these times. And I'm willing to be the attorney general that our state has never seen, but that our state desperately needs, to make sure that we're advocating for a more fair, equal state of Georgia, and where we truly see justice for all. So thank you for that question.
Wow, you covered it all, Christian. You're very impressive. You guys make it difficult to make a choice. We need all of you. I do love bold and brave. I love bold and brave. Thank you so much.
No, thank you.
Thank you very much. We have one last question from the Global Women's Caucus, and I'm going to read it. What will you do to assure that all women, including poor and minority women, can control their bodies by having full and affordable access to birth control and abortions in Georgia without interference from the state, and therefore have the right to choose when they want to start or enlarge a family?
So our current Attorney General doesn't view women's issues like these as healthcare, but I do. And first of all, forget me running for office. Me as a man, I don't feel like I have the right to tell a woman what they can or can't do with their body. And I think with the medical technology, I'll say that we have now, where safe abortions are able to be provided, where birth control is able to be provided. I think it would be my job as Attorney General to make sure that, again, we don't go backwards. Roe v. Wade was decided, several years ago, and it seems like ever since then, different states and different actors have been trying to chip away at what that represented. But I think, again, we need to secure that right for women. Men especially need to shut up and let women decide their own destiny. And then the men who are in these positions of elected office need to make sure we aren't going backwards, and that we keep these options that are safe and healthy available for women to choose from. I think you're on mute.
I said, thank you very much. Thank you. It's very inspiring to listen to you. I think that's going to be our wrap up. Jennifer, are you? Yeah, you're there. Okay, so it's your turn.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today, Christian, and good luck with your campaign.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. This was awesome. And I wish you all well wherever you are across the world. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Good luck.
Yeah.
And a huge thank you to everyone who joined us today. Every time we hear from candidates on the ground, I am truly inspired and energized to keep up the work of getting out the overseas vote. And we are incredibly grateful for the tremendous work that all of you are doing on the ground. And I promise you that we are going to keep up the fight on our end. On that note, please remember that all US citizens abroad can vote. In Georgia, you need to request your ballot each and every year. And please use the federal postcard application to do that. And you can fill this out at www.votefromabroad.org. This is different than the in-state absentee ballot process. And this gives you federal protections, including receiving your ballot 45 days in advance of the election, which means you should have already gotten it if you filled out your FPCA. Once you've received your ballot, please get it sent back as soon as possible. It does have to be sent back in the postal mail. And you can refer to our detailed voting guide and ballot access and return instructions for more information. There have been significant changes this year, both to the portal and to the process of voting with the addition of the runoff ballot. In closing, I'd like to give a big shout out to all of our great volunteers, both on the camera and behind the scenes. And thank you again to our participants for taking time to listen in and make informed decisions, really hard decisions, I have to say, because all of these candidates are so wonderful. And thank you for making sure that we get Democrats in office in Georgia. Please be sure to share this recording with your friends and your family. It is available on the Democrats Abroad Facebook page at facebook.com/Dems Abroad. Please keep in mind that Democrats Abroad is an all volunteer run and funded organization. Your support goes a long way to helping turn out the overseas vote. A donation of $10 can help us reach at least 20 Georgia overseas voters. We also hope you'll consider stepping up as a volunteer. No one else is doing this work of reaching overseas voters, and we need your help to make sure that Georgians living abroad participate in this crucial election. You can join our Slack channel to get involved. Please also follow us on social media in the Georgians Abroad Facebook group and at States Abroad on Twitter. We're going to end the recording now, and we can open it up for some discussion and questions. And thank you to everyone for joining us. Don't forget to vote, and please help turn Georgia blue in 2022.
Don't forget to come on the 23rd. April 23rd is our next event.
Very good point. Our next event is April 23rd. We will see you then.
Okay, I put the link in the chat.
Thank you so much.
And you can stay with voting questions if you need to ask something.
Bye.